Modern history admits that although Hellenism and the system of the Hellenes became the dominant system of all of Greece, they were originally a small tribe which came from a foreign place to the Greek island. When they arrived, the indigenous Pelasgians had already been living there. So where are the Hellenes really from? Archaeological evidence shows that the Greeks had been present in Egypt since 1600 BC, and likely even further back into the Proto-Greek Minoan Age.
Many of the Minoan buildings use the Egyptian cubit. And we do know that Minoans in the early Palace period were in Egypt because they found quite a lot of Minoan Kamaris were there. So there may have been people working there as apprentices or living there to somehow train in Egyptian architectural styles. And it's been also suggested that the gypsum facade at Knossos is kind of like imitating the use of the white gleaming stone used on the pyramids. So they may have picked up building and planning techniques from the Egyptians, but they built these palaces on their own. They borrowed other things from the Egyptians, like this icon of the Minoan genius. So there are a number of icons here and there. You had objects from Egypt exported to Crete, objects from Crete exported to Egypt. You also have a type of monkey appearing in Crete and in Akrotiri, at least in the artwork, known as the blue monkeys. And this is a very specific breed of monkey, a vervet. So that was coming in from Egypt. We know a lot of raw materials, ivory, gold, possibly ebony, things like that were coming in from Egypt. So they were an important trading partner, and Crete is just 90 miles from the Nile Delta. And so it's that kind of relationship where they were borrowing artistic styles and maybe even trading craftspeople back and forth, trading pottery. We know that both the Cypriots and the Egyptians loved Mycenaean pottery, and also probably the perfumed oil. So there was just a lot of interaction. Also, the art of the Amarna period of Akhenaten starts to become more naturalistic, as if imitating Aegean art. And again, that could just be for purposes of prestige. Where Minoans often tend, and it's not 100%, but there's a convention where women are portrayed with white skin and men are portrayed with red skin. This convention comes from Egyptian art. They were heavily influenced by the Egyptians and vice versa.
Timaeus, in the accounts of Timaeus and Critias by Plato, these Egyptian priests give the account that Sais, the city of Egypt, and Athens, Greece, were founded by and created by and peopled by the same goddess, who was initially called Neith in Egypt and called Athena in Greece, and says that the Greeks and Egyptians are related. He goes on to say that these deluges have occurred multiple times and that they have forgotten their history multiple times, as have other civilizations, saying that, in mind you are all young, there is no old opinion handed down among you by ancient tradition, nor any science that is hoary with age. The reasons which the ancient Egyptian priests give Solon as to why the Greeks have forgotten their origin. Persia conquered Egypt in 525 BC. Ionian and Carian pirates were forced by a storm to land on or near the Nile Delta. Pharaoh Psammetichus, or Psamtik, was facing an invasion by the Persian army, and in desperation it sought advice from the oracle of Leto at Buto, who cryptically advised him to enlist the aid of bronze men who would come out from the sea. Later he saw the shipwrecked Greek pirates and offered them in return for joining his military campaign 2 parcels of land on either side of the Nile, which became Naucratis and Heraklion. In 700 BC, the city of Naucratis was founded in ancient Egypt, acting as a symbiotic nexus for the interchange of Greek and Egyptian art and culture. At the same time, the city of Heraklion also became a port for Greek trade. Some of the earliest known examples of Greek writing were discovered on pottery from Naucratis. The ancient Egyptians and ancient Greeks had an inseparable bond, and this was especially made clear by the time of 570 BC, when Pharaoh Apries led the descendants of his Greek mercenary army, made up of 30,000 Carians and Ionians, against Amasis. Persia conquered Egypt in 525 BC.
By 332 BC, Alexander had conquered most cities from under Persia, adding them to his fast-growing empire. After conquering Tyre, Alexander and his company traveled to Egypt, where they were welcomed with a warm spirit. Egyptians praised Alexander and called him the savior of their land. When his company reached Pelusium, the gateway to Egypt from the east, Alexander was surprised by the reception of the Egyptians. Unlike every other city in the Persian territory, Alexander and his troops did not meet with any form of resistance. In fact, they were welcomed with loud cries of hope and jubilation. The huge crowd saw the Macedonian king as the savior who was to deliver them from the Persian tyrants, who had forcefully imposed their will on the Egyptians for many years and outlawed their traditions and religion. Being familiar with Alexander's battle reputation and how he had almost completely displaced Darius from the territories that had been under his rule for years, Mazaces decided to hand over the rulership of Egypt to Alexander without a fight. This was a smart move. After the Persians surrendered, Alexander left Pelusium and sailed up the Nile to an Egyptian city called Memphis. Memphis had been the traditional capital of Egypt for many native and even foreign rulers for many centuries. At the capital, he was also warmly received. A festival was held in honor of their deliverer, Alexander the Great, as a way to celebrate their freedom to express their religious and traditional customs. As opposed to the first Persian conquerors of Egypt who dishonored Egyptian gods and destroyed their temples, Alexander showed up to the religious capital as an ally, offering sacrifices to Egyptian gods such as Apis. The Egyptians saw and acknowledged this gesture, and in no time the priesthood at Memphis placed the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt upon Alexander's head. This was a symbol of the past pharaohs of Egypt. In just a short while after arriving in Egypt, Alexander, who was king of Macedonia, was now also pharaoh of Egypt.
Just as Timaeus explains to Solon that the Greeks called Neith Athena and the Egyptians called her Neith, the ancient Greeks syncretized all the ancient Egyptian gods with their own. How they would immediately adopt Egyptian gods further proves my point that they were originally inhabitants of ancient Egypt. Certain peoples in North Africa, where Egypt is, and peoples in Greece are in haplogroup J. North African DNA and Greek DNA also both belong to haplogroup E3b.